Now that you've tackled the fundamentals of classical and neoclassical theories, it's time to progress to more modern day trains of organizational thought. For the remaining modules, we will be examining the basics of modern management theories, specifically systems theory, cultural theory, and situational theory. We will start with systems theory. The emergence of the systems theory represents a fundamental shift in the dominant metaphor for talking about both the natural and the social world. Prior to the materialization of the systems perspective, the dominant metaphor for organizational communication had been the machine, the idea that organizations can be understood in a mechanical fashion. But now, theorists began to perceive organizations as consisting of elements that are both interrelated and interdependent of all things. Organizationally speaking, collective activity is difficult to imagine without interdependence of activities, people, and units. Under the systems theory, one can imagine an organization as a dynamic, ever-changing organism. Managers who lead by means of a systems approach attempt to understand employee behavior contextually and holistically. The most salient features of systems theory are holism. Holism is principle that when elements in a system function interdependently, result is different from the sum of its parts. Open systems. An open system is, in short, the exchange of information and energy within an environment. This information and energy are taken into the system, transformed through various system process, and put up as something different. Negative entropy. In a sense, an open system exhibits negative entropy. To put this in perspective, entropy is a measure of a degree of disorder that exits within a system at any given time. The more disorder, the more entropy exists. Therefore, negative entropy in systems theory means that by virtue of nature, all systems move forward, move toward entropy, and die. Systems can arrest entropy, but they cannot eliminate it. Organizations thrive and grow, but eventually deteriorate and succumb to entropy. Sound like the human condition? Exactly. Finally, hierarchy. One of the most important features of a system is in its ordering into a hierarchy. We will take a closer look at hierarchies later in this presentation. There are multiple founders and contributors to the systems approach. One of the earliest theorists who essentially prompted the systems movement was Ludwig von. Ludwig developed this approach following World War II in a quest to demonstrate the value of individual people working together to a productive whole. Ludwig was a scholar, a psychologist, a philosopher, and a biologist. He wrote and published dozens of scholarly articles on human and organizational connectivity, as well as research on technological advancements, biological evolution, and human cognition. Ludwig is best known for devising the concept of a general systems theory, also referred to as GST. GST sees all systems as having characteristics in common, regardless of their internal structures. Ludwig, in a sense, viewed general systems theory as a universal perspective that brings together all fields of study by providing them with a common language and shared set of principles. You can see how GST is so widely applied to organizational contexts. Different employees and departments work together collaboratively with virtue and open communication. Let's recap the fundamentals of systems theory. Systems theory is an approach to organizations which likens the company to an organism with interdependent parts. Each interdependent part has its own specific function and interrelated responsibilities. The system may be the entire organization, a division, department, or team. A manager should have an understanding of how the system operates and the relationship the parts have with each other. Employees interact with their work environments, which continually shift. Systems theory focuses on the arrangement of the parts which connect them as a whole. Key points. 1. The organization is an open system which interacts with the environment as in continually adapting and improving. 2. The organization influences and is influenced by the environment in which it operates. 3. If an organization is to be effective, it must pay attention to the external environment and take steps to adjust itself to accommodate the changes in order to remain relevant. 4. All parts of the organization are interconnected and interdependent. If one part of the system is affected, all parts are. 5. It is not possible to know everything about the system, but if you look hard enough, there are plenty of clues. Leaders who practice the systems approach in management apply the following techniques. 1. Use mixed groups. Groups across teams, departments, and divisions so that employees achieve a rich understanding of how change is seen from different perspectives. 2. Generate a holistic view of what must be done to give the organization a secure future. 3. Use diagnostic events to enhance employees' understanding of important interdependencies and to support them in devising best ways forward to achieve efficiencies. 4. Help different subsystems work well together in independent areas, such as smaller company projects. 5. Use processes that will increase collaboration across units. 6. Where possible, bring in outside parties, such as presenters and outside data to stimulate employees to think about operational and connectivity issues. In other words, don't just understand systems theory yourself. Educate your employees on the viewpoint as well. 7. Expose employees to the outside world in which the organization operates. 8. Ensure the organization stays externally sensitive and not insulated in its perspective. The systems approach provides value to managers in the following ways. 1. Managers using systems approach are less prone to look for immediate results. 2. Less likely to make decisions that trade off organizations' long-term health for looking good in short term. 3. Managers' awareness of interdependency of organizational activities is increased. 4. The approach is effectively applicable when end goals are either vague or defy measurement. Here's a look at the systems approach in action. This is a case study on General Motors, or GM. First, some background. GM, from its inception into the early 1960s, operated as if it were basically a closed system. Management decided on the products it wanted to sell, produced those products, and offered them to customers. GM assumed that whatever it made would sell, and for decades it was right. GM virtually ignored its environment, for the most part, because its executives saw the environment as having almost no impact on company performance. While some critics of GM still attack the firm for being too insulated from the environment, GM has become significantly more open within the past 50 years. The actions of consumer groups, stockholders, government regulators, and foreign competition have forced GM to interact with and to be more responsive to its environment. Now let's ask ourselves, why did GM feel the need to be more open to its environment? Closed systems can hamper growth since the flow of information stays within the system and has no chance to interact with or build on knowledge from the outer environment. The 60s and 70s were a time of new challenges and great change. Environmental concerns increased as prices and foreign competition led to an unprecedented downsizing of vehicles across all GM vehicle lines. Competition greatly increased. Here is an example of environment interaction of GM. GM profits struggled from 1981 to 1983 following the late 1970s and early 1980s recession. GM profits rebounded during the 1980s because after careful screening of the environment, which included the innovations of other companies and demands of consumers, GM had downsized its product line and invested heavily in automated manufacturing. In conclusion, it's not easy for the management to consider the pros and cons of open and closed organizations and to find the right mix. The solution is to adjust the organization according to the situation. In periods of changes, organizations are in need of more flexibility and innovation. This calls for an open system. Other times, some leaders might opt for a closed system when the organization is in a quiet phase, when, for example, it comes to the realization of certain projects. What are your thoughts on closed and open systems?